Dad thinks I'm a sicko for taking photos of his daughter. But it's literally my job? This happened to me a while ago at a volleyball training school that I worked at part-time. My dad co-owns the place with 4 other people, 2 of whom are ex-pro volleyball players from Russia. At the school, we have different colored shirts for the students based on age range: green, blue, white, and black shirt for staff. All of these have a giant logo of the school plastered on the front of it. Since I play soccer and have school to focus on, I only work there part-time. When I do things like update rosters, take payments, translate for people in Spanish, which is my first language, and things of that nature. Now, because I like photography and my pictures are pretty decent, my dad pays me extra than my usual salary to take pictures for their website and to help him with logos and color schemes for game uniforms, which are different from practice uniforms. Photoshop stuff. It's relatively easy. Anyway, I walked in one Thursday afternoon, and after completing some paperwork and finalizing some payments, I went out of the staff room or office to take pictures of the class in action. We teach from grade levels 8 through 12. Today was a class of 8th and 9th graders. I had my uniform on, but because it was a bit chilly inside, I didn't bother taking my jacket off. I thought that as long as I kept it unzipped so people could see the logo on the shirt, it'd be fine. Well, that was a mistake. I set my camera's shutter speed, checked to make sure the flash was off because I didn't want to mess with the students, and started snapping pictures. It was at this point that one girl's father came in to pick up his daughter. I should mention that normally the girl's mother picks her up, so he didn't know the staff very well. There was still about 5 to 10 minutes left of class, so he made his way over to the rows of chairs lining the walls of the gym. That was until he saw me, a punk high schooler, 11th grade at the time, taking pictures of his poor freshman daughter and her classmates that he thought I could use for my own enjoyment in the privacy of my bedroom. He immediately got up from his seat and stormed up to me. He demanded to know what I was doing taking pictures of his daughter and threatened to destroy my camera if I didn't give him the SD card right that second. I was so shocked at the sudden confrontation that I couldn't think of anything to say. So I simply grabbed the side of my jacket and opened it a little so the logo on my shirt became visible. The look on his face when he saw the staff uniform I had on was one of absolute horror and shame. He mumbled a half-assed apology and walked back to the seating area. To clarify some things, the girl's mother is the person who signed her up and who took her to and from practice. The dad either didn't read the terms and conditions of the sign-up contract or didn't care. That mother gave us approval on the form dedicated to photography of the students. Now, every time he walks in, he never speaks to me. Even when the bill for the classes is due to be paid, he either waits until he's sure I'm not around or he gets his wife to do it. He's actually a nice guy from what my dad tells me. He's just ashamed. Yep, sucks to be that guy. I don't know if he's truly a jerk, and you can kind of understand his protective instincts and reaction when he didn't have all the info. But still, I feel like you can at least ask a question before you fly into a dad rage, can't you? And honestly, 11th grade is how old? 17 or 18? Unless you were one of the few teenage boys in the world fortunate enough to not look like a creep at that age, I can guiltily admit that it might have helped him launch into his conclusion. But I'll say I think the fact that he was so darn ashamed afterwards does help paint him in a more positive light though. Regret and actually at least being able to mumble an apology hint that he was a better people than most who appear in these stories. If he's anything near as unlucky as I am, maybe he doesn't let out his rage much, and the one time he actually yelled at someone turned out to be a massive understanding. The times where I've done that are always enough to make me shudder thinking about years later. Entitled mother demands that I hire her daughter, then demands that I make her my partner. To preface, I own my own jewelry business. I have a couple of stories that can be added here if there's interest, but I was doing a small local Celtic festival and I was just starting out at the time. This was under my own purple 10x10 pop-up tent with attachable sidewalls, and this minor detail will come into play later. So the show was going and I only have 2 sidewalls up to block the sun. I'm sitting behind the tables in the back working on a custom order for a client. I'm in the corner where the sidewalls meet. Enter the entitled mum and her daughter. Daughter was about 15, I couldn't really tell to be honest. My darling husband starts his typical chat and spiel with the mother, and she tells him she's just looking. She then sees I'm working and starts to move items on the tables so she can lean over this 2-foot wide table that I'm working on. I pop my head up and lift my magnifying goggles and say, excuse me, Mom, please don't rearrange my stock. Well, I can't see what you're doing. I'm working on a client's custom necklace. If you need a hand, my husband will happily assist you. That doesn't look hard to do. You should hire my daughter. She makes paracord bracelets. Oh, well, we're not hiring at the moment, but I'll keep your suggestion in mind. Well, she can do sales. You shouldn't have a male working selling jewelry. At this point, my husband's eyebrows go up, and he rolls them behind her back. The daughter comes up and says, Mom, I want to buy this and this, picking up a couple of pairs of earrings and a necklace. No, sweetie. Wait until you're an employee and then use your employee discount. I had to butt in at this point. I'm sorry, but we're really not hiring at the moment, and that male is my husband and business partner. The entitled mother huffs and grabs her daughter by the arm and starts walking away. I nod to my husband to chase after them to get the product back from the entitled daughter. He comes back and we chuckle over the situation and we thought it was over. Well, we were wrong. So wrong. 1 hour later, the mother comes back. I've been watching from over there and you've sold a lot of jewelry. I can also see a lot of people walking around with your bags. Okay, thank you. So I think I should be your new business partner. You can make everything and I'll sell it and keep half the money. Honestly, my mind went into a blue screen of death mode and my jaw was on the ground. At this point, my husband chimed in. Excuse me, could you repeat that, ma'am? I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to her. My brain finally rebooted at that point. I'm sorry, I'm not looking for a partner right now. I already have one. Oh, he doesn't count. He's just your husband. He doesn't do anything. Okay, that's it. I stood up. Mom, I don't need or want a partner, and I'm not looking for an employee. This is a family business. Have a great day. And she stalks off. 10 minutes later, my hubby goes off for a break. Suddenly, I hear a ripping noise as a sidewalk gets ripped off my tent. I stand up ready to defend my cash box. Oh God, it's her. She starts ranting at me in a high-pitched, scratchy voice. Honestly, at this point, I can barely pay attention to her words. She's trying to grab at my tools while saying how she can sell my stuff for me and I need her. I scream for security, and my darling husband, I could see him 2 booths away, and I turn to her, Get your fricking hands off my stuff now and get the frick out of my booth. Security came, heard me out first, and removed her from the festival. I learned later that she tried this on another booth as well. I mean, why wouldn't you want to hire her? I see absolutely no downsides to being partners with someone who behaves like that. Good God, that's a lot of crazy to be putting on display up front when you're looking to find people to work with. I mean, honestly, at least they're probably better off for her flying off the handlebars and having such terrible people skills. She's showing exactly what she'd be like to work with and essentially blaring out a warning for everyone in the vicinity. Most awful people are at least capable of temporarily hiding their insanity right up until it's too late and you're entangled with them in a way that's legally and financially tricky to escape from. I don't know if the lady and her daughter initially walking away was attempted theft or not, but the fact that she did that and then came back to demand they go into business is wild. Topped only by her second return to engage in vandalism whilst still insisting that she'd make a valuable asset to the author. What does this woman mean when she says run the business? Because I sure as heck wouldn't want her in sales or talking to potential venues. Just a complete nutcase, and you dodged many, many bullets by telling her to get lost. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Try to oust my mother from spreading my grandmother's ashes? Okay, I'll steal some. Prepare for a long story. This has taken place over the past year and a half. It's been pretty crappy for my family, to say the least. My grandmother died in November 2016. It was a really hard loss for my family, especially my cousin, who was really close to her. We had a beautiful end-of-life ceremony for her in lieu of a funeral, and she was cremated as well. My aunt kept the urn. Over the years, my aunt has crept from a manageable pain in the butt to a completely self-absorbed, borderline psychotic individual. I could go on and on about the drama she's put my family through, but the important bits for this tale are that she lived closer to my grandmother throughout her life, though my mother, her sister, only lived about an hour away. And so she saw my grandmother more often, and often into adulthood, my grandmother seemed to have a preference for interacting with my mother, because she's just lower maintenance than my aunt. One last thing to mention is that my aunt has kicked my cousin out of the house about 4 times since he's turned 18, not even a year ago. They butt heads frequently. She's an alcoholic and he's, well, 18 and headstrong. After the end-of-life ceremony, my aunt stopped talking much to my mother. She never really mentioned having the urn, and my mother never laid eyes on it, despite it being her mother. A year or so went by until one day my aunt popped up and stated that she was going to spread the ashes at a nearby beach that we all visited throughout our lives. She picked a date without consulting anyone, specifically my mother, and said if we could make it, great, if not, tough luck. Needless to say, everyone was kind of annoyed, but my mother, myself, and my cousin switched our work schedules in order to be there. This was communicated clearly. Fast forward to the week before this event, and my aunt now messages us all stating that she's had an obligation the next day and won't be able to handle the ashes spreading on the date planned. She changed the date to 1 week later, and again, if you couldn't make it, tough luck. My mother and I were irritated and stated that we didn't think we could change our schedules 2 weeks in a row. My mother owns a business, which makes changing dates hard. My aunt went on to say that it was my mother's fault for the date switch due to her schedule, and when called out that she had said that she needed the date changed, abruptly ended the conversation and didn't respond to anything else. My mother and I then spoke at length. She was hurt and angry at her sister for never consulting with her about how to handle a ceremony with the ashes, and even more upset that her own sister wouldn't wait to do this with her. When asked about why this had to be done now, as opposed to waiting until everyone could be there, my aunt stated that my grandmother's brother, who was in poor health, wanted the ashes to be spread ASAP so he knows it was done, and that he wanted a video of the event for himself. My mother eventually told my aunt she wasn't going and that she just wanted to see the video that my aunt took of the event. She told me and my father that she just couldn't deal with my aunt's drama, and where she was focusing on her own mental health, didn't want to compromise her progress because my aunt just causes her so much distress. This enraged me. I was upset already, but was completely floored by the idea that my aunt would have this ceremony without anyone present but her and her boyfriend. My cousin didn't know if he could make it either, by the way. I was so hurt for my mother, who clearly was just avoiding conflict with her sister and would miss this event that could bring her closure with her own mother. They'd had a hard relationship as she grew up. I was frustrated for myself and my cousin, who would love to have an experience of letting go of my grandmother together as a family as well. So, I made a plan. My cousin was living back at home at the time, and he was also furious with his mother, so I told him, "Hey, I need you to do something really weird, but it's for my mother." And like a trooper, he says, "Anything for you guys." And that's how the ashes heist began. My cousin didn't hesitate. One afternoon, while my aunt was at work, my cousin broke into the urn and stole about half a cup of my grandmother, double-bagged it, and promptly hid it in a container of hair pomade, like a grandma's stash. Later that night, in the dark and pouring rain, we met in an abandoned parking lot where he passed me the goods. He said he stole himself some of my grandmother too. We felt vindicated. We hugged and parted ways. 2 weeks later, I gave my mother the ashes in a tiny keepsake urn while visiting her for my birthday. She cried, we hugged, and I could see the anxiety about the whole thing wash off her, because she's now in control of her own goodbye ceremony, independent from my aunt, who has no idea what happened. This past Sunday, my aunt spread the ashes at the beach as planned. She didn't take a video. She still hasn't responded to my mother, who asked for the video the day of. My aunt later messaged her and told her there was no video. They, quote, got to the beach late and didn't tape because there was no privacy. She went to a public beach, and she'd had her boyfriend bury my grandmother's ashes in the sand, which makes my blood boil truly. I'm not sure what happened to the "her brother needs a video" excuse. My cousin says the urn is empty at home, and no one has heard from my aunt at all afterwards. I can imagine myself being so much more furious if I hadn't bested her. I imagine my mother would be quietly devastated and never being able to do anything about it. My aunt lives in a world where she planned this event with no regard for anyone else and lied about making a video of it for the family. A video that would have been our only connection to that moment. A moment she robbed my mother, my cousin, and myself of. But she has no idea what my cousin and I have done and how we had to plan in advance for her debaggery in order to ensure that we were spared her selfishness. I can't wait to tell her. I wouldn't have switched the entirety of my grandmother's ashes with some other powdered substance for 2 reasons. The biggest being that would completely out my cousin as my accomplice and put him at risk of losing a place to live in his last weeks of high school, pre-college. I'm not going to jeopardize my cousin's life in any way, and while she may not have been able to tell the difference between fire pit ashes and people ashes, the risk was there. Second, and also important, is that taking all of the ashes in turn robs my aunt of her ceremony for her mother as well, whether she'd know it or not. I'm hugely upset with her actions and ending a relationship with her. However, the point of me doing this was because she took the choice away from my mother. I'd feel awful for doing the same to my aunt despite her actions. I may not be beyond stealing some of the ashes, but I wouldn't be able to justify that level of just revenge. I think the real revenge here is that I bested her by stealing some of the ashes and that she's literally losing her entire family due to her selfishness. Oh, and I know a lot of you are asking for an update when she finds out. I'm not sure when that will happen, as my cousin's housing security is the top priority at this point. Until then, all 3 of us, myself, my mother, and my cousin, all have ashes from the urn. My cousin gave me a lot. Half a cup is a lot of ashes for those small keepsake urns, so I brought myself a little urn as well. My cousin wants to take hers to Italy to spread in the homeland. I'm not sure where I'm at yet, or what my mother is planning. So, am I the jerk for stealing a good portion of my grandmother's final earthly remains? If anyone else in the comments can suggest a better way to deal with this than what happened in the story, the narrator would honestly like to hear it. Obviously, there's a great deal of subterfuge and going behind people's backs in this, but honestly, it doesn't feel like there was any more conflict-free way for the mother here to also get some closure and a final goodbye to her mother, without also kicking up a massive fuss. I'd also like to commend the author from refraining on stealing the whole darn thing out of genuine concern for her aunt's well-being, despite how nasty and selfish that woman was being about it. I did search their profile to see if there was an update and ending to it, but alas, no dice. It may well be that they realized that everyone was just happier with the deception and it would do the most to keep the peace. As much as I enjoy a good meltdown, these are real people with real feelings, so it might have been better for her to take the moral high ground. Karen on a plane. I was on an airplane and right when we landed, a Karen in the back unbuckled and darted to the front of the plane to get off first. She didn't make eye contact and felt that she was special. I'm talking about going from the very last seat on the plane, down the whole row and past first class, basically standing at the little kitchen thing in the front. All this time, the seatbelt sign was still on and we were still rolling down the runway. The flight crew had asked for her to return to her seat until we reached the gate, but she wasn't even responding. Everyone was basically just trying to wait it out. It had been a long flight, 8 hours, and at this point we were exhausted anyways. No one said a word. Suddenly, the captain announced that we had a special guest on board and he'd be coming out to greet after we were settled at the gate. The Karen stood there awkwardly until we did the whole rolling into the gate and whatever planes do when they land for about 15 to 20 minutes. Everyone sat there waiting to see what the captain was talking about. Eventually, the captain came out and asked the lady to please move back a little to try and get to his special guest. Then a little more. Then a little more. He was looking from row to row trying to find a specific person. Everyone was watching and looking to see who it could be. He kept going and going, asking the Karen to please step back a few more steps each time. Finally, they approached the rear of the plane, and he asked her to sit for a second while he grabbed the intercom at the rear of the plane. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to announce our special guest sitting in seat 42C. Let's give her a round of applause. The whole plane went wild with laughter and applause. I loved every moment of it. Yes, thank you. The public shaming of selfish people really is a wonderful thing. I don't know what the captain was going through, but he'd evidently had enough of this kind of person on his flights and decided that he was taking collective revenge. Glorious. Part of my brain is wondering how long the plane was held up by this stunt and how many of the passengers had connecting flights that were imperiled by it. But then again, my planes have come into airports a few minutes early a lot of times, so who knows? Personally, I'm of the wait until the queue of people moving out has reached my row before I even stand up camp, so I have zero understanding of this Karen. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.